The air at dawn in the Mojave sits around 58 degrees. It smells like dust and sage, and something older than both. The light comes in sideways, turning the Joshua trees into silhouettes, and for about 45 minutes, this place looks like the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. That's the dangerous part. Somewhere in that golden window, a guide is running through a safety briefing. They're pointing at a trail marker, the one that means stay left, stay on the path, don't follow your instincts if they pull you right. Most tourists are nodding. Some are already looking past the marker toward the ridgeline, toward whatever the desert is quietly promising them. One of them isn't coming back. Between 2019 and 2021, the Consumer Product Safety Commission tracked 2,577 OHV-associated deaths across the United States. 1,728 of those were ATV specific. That's nearly 3 people every 2 days on machines designed for recreation, in landscapes designed for neither mercy nor hesitation. And here's the part that should unsettle you. There is no clean national database isolating ATV tourist deaths specifically in the Mojave Desert. The number officially doesn't fully exist. What we have instead are county coroner reports, sheriff incident logs, and a scattered archive of stories that never quite made national news. Which means the real count is almost certainly higher than anyone has published. This video is built from those scattered pieces, the cases that did surface, the patterns that keep repeating, and one question that runs underneath all of it like a fault line. Why would someone with a professional guide beside them, someone whose entire job is to keep them alive, look past the trail marker and choose the other direction? Before we answer that, you need to understand what the Mojave actually is, because most people who ride into it have no idea what they've agreed to. It is not a landscape that hides what it is. The Mojave is transparent about its intentions. What it does is make those intentions feel manageable, right up until they aren't. Here's the math the desert runs on. At peak summer, ground surface temperatures in the Mojave have been documented at 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Not air temperature, ground temperature. The air might read 115, and your brain might file that under very hot. But the surface you're standing on, the sand, the rock, the packed alkali flat, is cooking at temperatures that will blister skin in seconds. In at least one documented search and rescue operation in conditions like these, handlers pulled their trained dogs from the field. Not because the dogs were unwilling, because the ground was literally burning their paws through their pads. If the professionals can't work in it, picture what it does to someone stranded in it alone, without water, without shade, without anyone who knows where they went. The human body in peak Mojave heat loses water faster than most people believe is possible. Estimates from desert survival researchers put sweat loss at roughly 1 liter per hour during moderate exertion in extreme heat. An average person carries about 2 to 3 days of water in their body under normal conditions. Out here, that math collapses to hours. And then there's the distance problem. The Mojave is deceptive in a specific, cruel way. A ridgeline that looks like a 10-minute ride can be 45 minutes away. The air is so clear, the terrain so unobstructed, that your eyes lie to you, consistently, reliably, fatally. Riders who leave the trail to just check out something nearby discover too late that nearby was a fiction the desert invented. From 2019 to 2021, the CPSC recorded 2,577 OHV-associated deaths nationwide, 1,728 of them on ATVs. This is not a fringe activity with fringe risks. This is a sport with a body count that doesn't make the news often enough to feel real. That's the environment. Now here's what people actually do when they get into trouble in it, and some of the decisions are almost impossible to explain. Start with the case that worked, because understanding why one person survived makes the ones who didn't even harder to sit with. A 70-year-old man was riding the Arizona Peace Trail through the Hualapai Mountains when his ATV rolled off the trail and fell several hundred feet below the path. By any reasonable measure, that should have been the end of the story. But this man did something that almost nobody in a desert emergency actually does. He stopped. He stayed with his machine. He pulled out a blue tarp and laid it across the rocks. He held up his helmet. He made himself as visible as he possibly could to anything flying overhead, and then he waited. He had tried to text a friend about the crash. The message never sent, no cell service, so there was no rescue team already mobilized, no coordinates transmitted, no one who knew exactly where he was. Just a man and a tarp and the patience to trust that someone would eventually come looking. A helicopter found him. He walked away with minor injuries. That story matters because it's the exception. It's what the outcome looks like when instincts align with reality. Now here's what happens when they don't. 3 riders near Bullhead City decided to leave a marked trail and cut across open desert terrain toward a casino. It's the kind of decision that makes sense in the abstract. The destination is visible, the route looks passable, the shortcut seems obvious. What they couldn't see from where they were standing was the network of canyons and dry washes between them and where they wanted to go. The desert cliffed them out. They ran out of food. They ran out of water. A rescue team pulled them out. And then, and this is the part that's genuinely difficult to process, they went back to retrieve their ATVs. One of them called 911, unable to give his precise location, forcing searchers to work a 4-mile radius before a helicopter finally spotted him. The same people, the same desert, the same outcome, twice. But even that case has a limit to how far it can prepare you for what happened to Daniel Carbonaro and Chris Rice. 2 riders from Santa Barbara, they left Randsburg at 2:30 in the morning, planning what they described as a 45-minute trip. They brought no food, no water, no extra clothing, no phones. Both were found dead after going off a cliff. Kern County investigators believe they died on impact. 45 minutes. That was the entire gap between what they expected and what the Mojave had planned. All 3 of those cases share something critical. These people were completely on their own, no guide, no professional, no one whose job was to say stop. What happens when someone has that person beside them and ignores them anyway? That question has a shape in the industry. It has a name, actually. Guides call it client drift. The moment when a paying customer stops treating the professional beside them as an authority and starts treating them as a suggestion. In a guided ATV tour, the guide's power is real but fragile. They can slow the group, they can redirect, they can stop the tour entirely and refuse to continue. What they cannot do, what no guide anywhere has the legal or physical ability to do, is prevent an adult from making a choice. And in the Mojave, the gap between I'm going to do this and it's too late to undo this is measured in minutes. The liability flows in strange directions when things go wrong. In 2018, during a guided ATV excursion near Las Vegas, a rider's ATV reportedly locked up and went over a cliff. The rider survived, but with serious injuries. A negligence lawsuit followed, filed against the tour operator, not the rider, and the case eventually reached Nevada appellate courts. Think about what that means. A professional guide led a tour. Something catastrophic happened. And the legal question wasn't whether the rider made choices, it was whether the company failed to prevent the consequences of those choices. That's the world guides operate in. They are responsible for outcomes they don't fully control. Now consider what that dynamic looked like in the Morongo Basin in the weeks surrounding July 22nd. Fang Jin was 40 years old, a Chinese national, and she had done what you are supposed to do. She hired a guide. His name was John Fitzpatrick, and his job was exactly what it sounds like. Take someone unfamiliar with this terrain and bring them back safely. She was last heard from on July 22nd. Fitzpatrick was reported missing by a friend on July 30th, 8 days later. In September, his remains were found in Anza Borrego State Park. Fang Jin has never been found. Two people entered that landscape together. The guide, the one with the knowledge, the one whose entire professional identity was built around desert survival, did not make it back either. Available reporting does not tell us what happened between July 22nd and the point of no return. It does not confirm who made which decision or when or why. What it leaves behind is a silence that asks its own question. What does it mean when the guide cannot save himself? We keep looking for the moment where someone made the wrong choice. But what if the choice is not always obvious, even to the person making it? It's not recklessness, it's not stupidity. Experts who study desert fatalities consistently identify two profiles: people who are genuinely ignorant of the danger and people who are overconfident, not unlucky, not careless in some obvious visible way, overconfident. And overconfidence doesn't feel like a flaw when you're inside it. It feels like experience. It feels like good judgment. Think about the last time you were somewhere unfamiliar with someone who knew it better than you. Maybe a hiking trail, maybe a foreign city. At some point, their caution probably started to feel like over-caution. The path looked fine, the neighborhood looked fine. You'd been paying attention, you'd been watching, and your own read of the situation felt just as valid as theirs. That's not arrogance. That's a completely ordinary human cognitive response to new information. Now put that response inside a machine, in a desert at 9 a.m. when the temperature is still manageable and the terrain looks exactly as approachable as it did in the brochure. The guide's warning stops sounding like survival information. It starts sounding like liability language, like the warning label on a hairdryer that says don't use near water. Technically true, probably not relevant to you. One survival researcher put it plainly: when you read about someone getting caught in a survival situation, there are usually two factors involved. They don't tell anybody where they're going, and they don't bring any gear. Not malice, not thrill-seeking, just two quiet failures of imagination about what could actually happen. And the guided tour environment makes this worse in a specific way. When you pay for an experience, you become a consumer. The guide becomes a service provider. That mental model is almost impossible to override because it is reinforced by everything around you: the waiver you signed, the matching helmets, the Instagram moment you are already composing. You paid for adventure. The guide is the person delivering it. The 2018 Las Vegas lawsuit illustrates exactly how durable that framing is. A rider went over a cliff on a guided tour, survived, and sued the tour operator, not themselves. The operator. Even after nearly dying, the mental model held. The guide was responsible for the outcome. Which raises the question nobody in the industry has fully answered. If the psychology is this predictable, if overconfidence in guided environments follows patterns researchers can map and name, why has not something changed? What does it say about you, honestly, that you recognized yourself somewhere in that description? Drop it in the comments. Because I think more people relate to this than would admit it out loud. The Mojave keeps running the same experiment, and the results keep coming back the same way. When someone goes missing in the Mojave, the clock doesn't start when the search team assembles. It started the moment they separated from the last person who knew where they were going. Search and rescue operations in desert terrain follow a brutal logic. A study of 1,190 SAR operations across Utah's national parks between 2001 and 2005 found that most cases resolved within 24 hours. That sounds like reassurance. It isn't. What it actually means is that the window for a live rescue is often measured in a single day, and in peak Mojave heat, it can be shorter than that. Of those 1,190 operations, 92 people were saved, 67 were not. The San Diego County SAR Bureau reports a 98% success rate going back to 1963. 98%. That number sounds like a safety net, but read the fine print. That figure means a definitive answer was reached, not that the person was found alive. The case closed. The family got an answer. That's what 98% means. Sometimes the answer is a person walking out of the desert. Sometimes it's remains. And sometimes the desert offers something even harder to process, evidence without resolution. Two tourists once had their car found parked on a barely visible abandoned road deep in Mojave terrain. Investigators found signs suggesting they had fallen into an old mine shaft and suffered leg fractures that left them unable to move. Old mines are everywhere out here, unsealed, unmarked, invisible until you're already falling. A guide knows where they are. A rider who left the guide does not. At 130 degrees ground temperature, search dogs get pulled from the field. Their paws can't take it. Helicopters scan terrain that looks identical from above, ridge after ridge of the same bleached rock, the same dry wash, the same silence. Every hour that passes narrows the outcome. If you're someone who takes desert safety seriously, who wants to understand these patterns before they become personal, subscribe to this channel. Not for me, for the community of people who believe knowing this matters. The search finds something. Sometimes a person, sometimes only evidence, and sometimes the desert gives back nothing at all, which is its own kind of answer. Fang Jin is still missing. That sentence doesn't resolve. There's no follow-up paragraph where the sheriff's department issues a statement, no family press conference, no closure that lets you move on to the next story. She hired a guide. Her guide's remains were found in Anza Borrego State Park in September, more than 100 miles from where they started. And the gap between those two facts, what happened, in what order, and why, exists nowhere in any available record. The data system has no category for that gap. She is listed as a missing person. The case is technically open. Open means unsolved, which in bureaucratic language sounds like a temporary condition, a problem awaiting its solution. In practice, for families, open means permanent uncertainty. It means every year that passes adds another layer of silence over the last day anyone heard her voice. The Mojave has been doing this for a long time, and not only to individuals. In October 2010, during the California 200 off-road race, a crash killed 8 spectators in the desert, 8 people who came to watch, not to ride. A federal review followed. The race organizers' events were suspended. A lawsuit was filed and eventually settled in 2013. 8 families, one afternoon, a landscape that absorbed the tragedy and kept going, unchanged, exactly as it was before. That's the scale we're actually talking about, not isolated incidents separated by years. A pattern. A TVS, guided tours, races, solo rides, 45-minute trips. The category doesn't matter. What matters is the environment, and the environment doesn't negotiate. There is no clean public data set counting ATV tourist deaths, specifically in the Mojave. That absence is not an accident. It's a reflection of how fragmented the accounting is, spread across county coroners, sheriff departments, park incident logs, and families who never made the news. Which means the question isn't just why people ignore the one person whose job is to keep them alive. It's what we do with everything the desert has already told us. Go back to the beginning of this story. The guide. Standing in the morning light, pointing at a trail marker, the rider looking past it. That image seemed simple the first time you saw it. A professional doing their job. A tourist distracted by scenery, a small, ordinary moment of inattention. It wasn't. The guide wasn't pointing at a rule. They weren't managing liability, running through a checklist, or performing the ritual caution that comes printed on every waiver. They were pointing at something more fundamental, the boundary between the world where help exists and the world where it does not. On one side of that marker, a route someone knows, a path that leads back, a system of people and radios and helicopters that can reach you if things go wrong. On the other side, the Mojave's version of you, which is a problem to be solved before sundown. That's what the rider looked past. Not a suggestion, a threshold. The failure isn't stupidity. It was never stupidity. It's something far more human and far harder to fix. The inability to translate abstract risk into felt urgency. The guide's words arrive as information. The desert arrives as scenery. And information, no matter how accurate, cannot compete with what your eyes are telling you in that moment. That the ridgeline is beautiful, that the morning is cool, that you've been paying attention, and everything looks fine. Daniel Carbonaro and Chris Rice left Randsburg at 2:30 in the morning for a 45-minute trip. They weren't ignoring a guide. They had no guide. But the cognitive failure was identical, the gap between what they expected and what the desert actually was. 45 minutes became forever. Fang Jin hired someone specifically to close that gap, and the desert still found the seam. So here's what the guide was actually saying in every briefing, on every tour, in every desert, every morning. Tell someone where you're going. Carry more water than you think you need, then carry more. If something goes wrong, stay with your vehicle. It is visible from the air, and you are not. And when a professional speaks, understand that they are not managing your experience. They are managing your survival. That's it. That's the entire lesson the Mojave has been teaching for decades, at a cost no data set has fully counted. The desert doesn't care about your itinerary. It doesn't care about your confidence, your experience, or how many times you've done something like this before. It only cares about your choices. And the guide standing in that morning light, pointing at the marker, already knew what the desert knows, that some choices made once in the space of a single distracted moment cannot be unmade.